I think they're broadcasting here, they broadcast for the YouTube channel.
Right,
I guess what she's saying, though, is that we can't tap and hear it, so we just have to trust that they're on.
but everybody still needs to really speak up, because otherwise, within the room, these aren't doing us any
Well, I
good
got 3 of them. Is that enough, you think?
for YouTube. It doesn't, that only helps for YouTube, doesn't help in the room at all.
This doesn't help at all?
No,
I need that one recording,
Okay,
yeah.
so I've stalled long enough for the flashing to stop.
yes.
So I guess, let's see, what do we got here? Good evening, everyone. At 6:33, I'd like to call this meeting in order. Will you please rise if possible? And we'll say the pledge of allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Andrew Benson. Here. Ruth Groff.
Here.
Brian Winlosey. Joseph Wetmore.
Here.
Edward Levine.
Here. So it looks like the first order of business in our packet is number 4, outside user water application requests. And does anybody have any comments about this?
Trying to remember which one this is.
This is the one on Lansing.
This is the one we talked about last month, and they straightened it out across the road this time.
Well, we have our engineer here, which might be able to shed some light on this.
Is there anyone representing?
I'm looking here, and I don't see anybody. Of course, we don't call in, so I was scanning the audience to see if someone wanted to be the advocate here.
Well, I can share with the board that this revised proposal is...
Can you come up to the
If I
mic?
can- if
I think
can-
you need to go to the mic, please, if
Can
you don't mind.
Can I run the meeting? If you could just come up to the mic, okay? Thank you.
Okay, so for the mic record, it's Dave Herrick, PG Miller, County Engineer. So the application is, Joe, as you have recognized, is more consistent with what was originally conceived back in 2014 in terms of routing of the water service and the various components, the meter pit, the curb valve. So this is more in keeping with what was originally conceived. At this point, I would recommend to the board that you go ahead and forward it to the Water and Sewer Advisory Board for deliberation. That's the correct process.
I do have a quick question on how this works. My understanding is when you get to the end of a water line, the person who's next in line can ask to be added on. Does that continue after this application, or does it quit with this one and the next person can't and the next person? I don't know how that works.
This would be a dedicated line for this particular property, and other
Could the next person,
neighbors could not hook onto it.
okay,
Because once you hook onto it and have more than the one parcel, then you've got multiple parties and it becomes a municipal piece of infrastructure.
so this line as proposed would not be big enough for the next person to hook up if they so chose to, or,
It could not.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
It would have to be, if there were more people continuing south on Lansing Station Road, then they would have to put a formal water main in.
Okay,
Yeah. But again, speaking to the merits of this current proposal, it's consistent with what was originally conceived in 2014 as opposed to what you had seen last month.
I had a question. Can you explain how it's going to go across the road without going under the road? They said they were not going to, when I read through it.
Well, they're going to have to cross under the road.
They are.
Perpendicular. Oh, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Oh, yeah,
With a
yeah.
copper pipe, is that what they,
Tubing, yes,
copper tubing?
yes. Yeah. So if you look at the sketch there, you can see that there is a...
That's what I thought, but when I read
90-degree
through it,
crossing.
I got confused.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be under the shoulder of the road until they get opposite their property, and then they'll come perpendicular to the road from there.
So 10 years from now, that pipe breaks under the middle of the road. They're responsible for digging up the road? How does that work?
Well, they would be, in essence, responsible for the cost of repair. I would expect that, in a situation where there might be a hazard to the road, the town has to react in order to protect against, any damage, personal or property, then the town certainly has the ability to do that.
So the town would come in, fix it, and then bill the property owner
That
for...
would be the mechanism.
Okay, thank you.
So this water line's not dedicated, if this does go through, will not be dedicated to the town?
Will not be dedicated to the town.
Okay, because in past history, what happens is that when the water line is dedicated, usually it'll go to the curb box, and then from the curb box, it is the owner's responsibility to go from the curb box to their house if something breaks. And if this is approved and going through from a town board member standpoint, I would like to make crystal clear that that the financial responsibility will be on the homeowner.
Let me
But
ask
it's
you...
not dedicated to the town.
It is not dedicated to the town.
So,
And the other thing, just a minute, Joe, I'll let you have the floor. The other thing is that, once again, Mike Mosley's on this Water and Sewer Advisory Committee, so obviously his input will be critical as far as the feasibility of going forward if things break. Okay? So now, Joe, go ahead with your question, and I'll ask the rest of the board if they have any more additional questions.
so normally when we go down a road, we go down one side of the road, and we drill under the road to get the houses on the other side of the road, right?
Correct.
Who owns the pipe under the road in those circumstances?
The town does. So in the case where there's a town main,
Mm-hmm.
then the lateral under the road to the curb box on the opposite side of the road
Mm-hmm.
is part of the town's infrastructure. And then from that curb box, usually at the street line into the house, is the individual's responsibility. In this case, the curb valve, the curb box is going to be located right at the connection to the existing main, and then there's a meter pit. So everything from that meter pit down the road, under the road, into the house is the landowner's responsibility.
Do we have other instances in the town in which it's a private line running under a town road? You may not know the answer to that.
I guess I
It would be Sun Path that used to be back when I first started, but again, this, it's gonna be running parallel, so
Well, it goes under the road at one point, yeah.
it does.
It's actually relatively common. The town is named in the easement, so it has the rights to get to the line in case of an emergency. And the outside user agreement requires when the main is extended that they join the main and may have to reconnect or reinstall a curb box. So the reason that you don't see a lot of them is once we get a certain number of outside users, we do a district map and bring them all in to solve the little hiccups that could exist. But in this case, as Dave said, there's no main extending down towards the house, so this is a private line the whole way. That landowner is responsible for. And your question goes to the point, I thought your first question goes to the point, how far? If someone wants to run a private line 2.5 miles, is that really an outside user agreement or a backlot extension? That's the kind of question I think that the Water and Sewer Board looks at. Like where is a reasonable place to draw the line without extending actual public infrastructure? I think we could all agree 2 miles would probably be too much. Is 400 feet too much? 600? Does it depend on topography? Does it depend on feasibility? I think the answer is yes, and that's what the advisory board is charged with, reviewing those standards, then making a recommendation to this board, which it can accept or reject.
So I guess my last question at this point is, does the homeowner have the right to dig up the road and repair the line if there's a problem?
Not without a permit.
Right.
Okay, so if there's an emergency situation, they can't come in and dig it up, the town has to?
they would have to get the permit, or the town would have to, and sometimes they sleeve them under the road, so you just slide out the bad pipe and slide in a new one.
I'm just thinking Saturday night is when these pipes break, is my understanding. So they're not coming down and getting a permit, but somebody's got to fix it. So basically, if it breaks, the town's going to come and fix it if it's under the road.
If there's a public danger presented by that break, yes.
Okay,
And the town and/or Bolton Point would certainly have the right, the ability to just shut the water off at that curb box, which is going to be located next to the main. So if there's, you know, if the homeowner's out of water for a weekend because something happened with their line, no, that's the way it will be.
And to clarify even further, the outside user agreement tells homeowners, don't disconnect your well. Because you're not guaranteed water in case of an emergency or in case of a state moratorium on water distribution because of an extreme drought, which we haven't really seen in this area for, I don't know, 400 years, but I guess it all depends on where you get off the bus as to what's extreme.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Looking at this design, it looks like the main doesn't really go that far under the road. And give you a little more background, when Milton Metals was put in, we asked Bolton Point if we could put a casement in first, right, a bigger pipe. So that if something happened, you basically snip them at both ends, you pull it out and put a new pipe in, okay? That way you don't tear up the road. The answer was no. So pray to God that this doesn't happen here, but what also has happened is that as this thing comes down over there, there's other routes that hopefully they can get to, but this is something that the highway department's going to have to dig up that piece of road, God forbid, if that breaks or leaks or whatever. This is why you like to have those things. The other thing is that they have a machine which is actually amazing how it actually just pushes the pipe under the road, doesn't dig it up. So that integrity is not impaired, whatever, so you don't have a constant bump in there. But anyways, so I guess our duty tonight is, do we want to send this to the Water Sewer Advisory Board for advice?
I would move that.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Is this a motion, I guess we're doing?
News to me.
I don't think it's a resolution, it's not a law.
I don't think you need to. I think you just make the referral and ask for an advisory opinion.
Okay,
It's me.
yeah.
All right, so we're all in agreement, right?
Yeah.
There's no controversy.
Advice is welcome.
Another adventure on Lansing Station Road. Okay, this brings us to the next one, 4B, which is Ridge Road across from Lansing High School, and this is Mr. Brian Jackson. Hi, Brian. Yes.
Okay.
Is your input going to be needed on this one also, Dave?
Yes.
Well, why don't you just keep that seat then right there?
Do you want to?
And you can pull up a chair next to him, Dave or Brian, if you want to.
Okay.
Or you can share the mic, or you can take turns, however you feel comfortable.
Good evening.
Hi.
How are you? So I'm here to represent the landowners, Barbara Westerwheel and Catherine Lord. They own a parcel of land across from the high school on Ridge Road. And they're seeking the ability to adopt it into the water district that's down that area. It's a adjoining property at, I believe it's 267 Ridge Road that had a private lot water line extension done quite a few years ago. And we currently have an interested party, a buyer. He's here present now. Robert Carpin, back here tonight. And him and his wife are Lansing residents, and they're interested in purchasing the property and building a residential home there. And they'd like to have a water line extended. It runs down Wildman Road. I contacted Bolton Point, and they did send me a map. I think I included it with the information there.
Yep, right here.
So can I clarify this map? The blue line that I'm seeing along Wildman Road is the main that's currently in place?
Yes.
And then the red line is the one that you're proposing coming across?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's another blue line there. You can see where it's indicated there's already a water extension there. It goes to 267.
267.
277, sorry.
Is that on the far left?
Oh, I see it now, yeah.
It's on the far right there. I wrote it in there.
Oh, far right?
You can see it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, gotcha.
and there's one to 264, and then there's another one that wiggles down.
Okay.
Okay.
So the purpose of tonight's meeting is for us to,
Adopt them into the water, that parcel of the water district, and allow for an easement to go under the town road to install the water main.
okay, not this one's a state road, right, Ridge Road?
And, yeah, we have to get an easement from the state, I understand that.
Okay. And that would be eventually dedicated to the town, or how would that work, considering it's a state road?
Well, they have to go underneath Wellman, which is ours first,
Right.
and then they're going to have to get permission from the state DOT to go right there.
Okay.
Um,
Is this a chicken and the egg situation, which comes first, the easements or the approval? Or is the approval contingent on the easements happening? Or is this so far so good? Or does this go to the advisory board, which I don't think this one does, right? This is pretty well cut forward. And please chime in now.
I'm not sure why this one wouldn't go to the advisory board.
Let's find out.
This has already been noted, I think they used it one time, we called the Hunt Apartments.
Mm-hmm.
That has been hooked up to the water district forever. And I don't see from a technical perspective that this property having a appropriately sized water service lateral will create any issues for the town. This would abut the water district, existing water district, unlike the other one we just talked about. I guess the only question might be for the town to consider and for advisory board to weigh in on might be the location of that lateral. If it's, I don't know that what's been represented as the red line on here, if that has to be the hard and fast location, because I'm not quite sure who owns the Gore property between Wildman Road and Ridge Road. I don't know the status of that.
That isn't the schools?
It could, I'm not sure. We've got this very odd triangle there between Wildman and Ridge Road, and I don't know at this time what the ownership status is, but I also does the town own Wildman Road at the intersection with Ridge?
Yes.
Okay, so there might be some benefit in having the water service parallel that intersection, the Wildman Road intersection, as opposed to going through the Gore property between the two highways.
So you'd move it to the left.
Move it to the west, potentially. And I don't know if there's anything etched in stone at this point about where the house would be and relative to the water service. That might be a preferred location as opposed to trying to understand the ownership of that little triangle between Wildman and Ridge Road.
And there's enough pressure?
Yes.
I personally would like to see this go to the Water and Sewer Advisory Board to just determine, all the property easements are in place. Is this the best place in terms of engineering to put it, or, as you said, moving it over? What works and what doesn't, because I feel like I'm just barely understanding the information. I'd like to, know who owns all the property, make sure all the easements are in place and such.
So that is, an advisory board is not in the purview of finding easements, right? But what they can do is they can advise that those easements need to be established and determined. And there might be something, Mr. Jackson, that you might be proactive, if you haven't already, to find out where those easements are. But we would, as the advisory board, advise them what the best situation would be on that. And I'll keep dropping hints as far as this goes for you, but you might want to see where those easements are, and maybe it would be easier, might be along that road. Where is the connection out into Ridge Road? Ours be less invasive, shall we say?
Maintenance-wise, it makes sense. Depending on where the highway is going to be responsible for this service.
Okay.
To to what distance, otherwise you're going to have to dig through trees. Right? So,
So if you want to push this on to the advisory board, we'll put,
I just need to understand the difference between this one and the previous one. Is the one a private?
That we're not looking at a service line extension that's, 340 feet long. Whether or not a meter pit would be required as part of this installation.
Thank you.
It's more akin to, it's a longer lateral than what we.
then eventually, when we have enough outside users, we roll them in. And then before we,
Completely different process.
Can you tell us
So
the difference
it's
between?
unclear to me what is actually being requested, $1,000 process. If you're talking an outside user agreement, then you're talking an outside user agreement, which goes to the Water Sewer Advisory Board. Ironically, both processes for extension of the Consolidated Water District, because instead of one person incurring all the publication and all the other expenses, outside user, and when the presentation was made earlier, he asked to be annexed or appended into the water district, not to become an outside user. I think it's vernacular. I think they necessarily as worried as exactly when it is they come into the district, whether it's now or later, but that's their choice.
Does that make,
It easy, at least for the applicant, because your biggest problem here is going to be at perm 32 for utility. They do it by permit. It's the same thing.
So you just apply for a permit?
Right, you're gonna need someone to draw it out. They're not as, let's say, tough on utilities as, let's say, an industry that wants to put infrastructure on a state. As long as you don't have too many acute angles,
Yeah, the pressure would be fine.
yeah. So outside, sufficient excess capacity that it's not really gonna affect an outside user. But we just can't make a promise that we're gonna provide. Yeah, they'll pay a higher.
it's 1.5 times.
Two. If it's a consolidated water district, they pay a higher water rate because inside the water district, you have a tax bill supposed to subsidize the district. It's supposed to be a somewhat balanced transaction, although it is legal for the district to make money on outside use.
Increase in what you'd have to pay once you hooked up the water until you got rolled into that district.
I guess the other question is how many other,
We did it,
Like 5 years ago, I think.
yeah, 5 years ago, we drew them in. There might be one down off Myers. I don't,
consolidating, maybe 15 or 20? Give, throw out-
no, my guess is it would be 2 to 4 years before they'd be formally in the water district.
Recommend the board. right?
yeah.
Go from there, so.
Just so you have an idea of what you're.
And considering you have this other factors to deal with, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, any questions from you, Brian? Or from?
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for.
And issue a preliminary approval. Or they could say, no, this is crazy. And then you would go about getting your easements and whatever it is that you need in place. That's what Bolton Point considers a permit to let you get your water permit for Bolton Point. And here, I think we'll work with you to solve that.
Who would I contact about that?
For the, well, it'll somewhat generic, but each easement's a little bit individual. You may find a landowner who wants something in it. And the town just
Number, and hopefully there'll be a response to you afterwards.
Okay.
It also means, though, you can still start to,
I don't know that you could speak too specifically about where it's going to be, other than it's in that neighborhood.
our highway superintendent likes it along roads for ease of access in case, God forbid, this happens on a Sunday night, whatever. At Bolton Point, they shut the water off, and that's when all the fun begins.
Should he put in a new application, because his application,
I'm kind of like asking these, I think.
Well, I was going to say, these documents,
He can make an addendum to it as opposed to doing a brand new. We have a pretty good idea where we want it.
okay,
So our advice would be to to the west a little bit, if I read this map right? Or to the left, in this case, where the road is.
And then run along the other road till you wanted to turn it towards your house. That way the highway department can get to it if they need to easily without having to drive.
Or along the edge.
Yeah, go along the edge of that road, parallel, right? And then,
It's just
Yeah.
shifted west.
yeah. Yep.
And as far as like the curb box,
Advisory board review about whether this can be a more conventional water service lateral. It's longer, but
Right? Is this for further expansion, so you have a bigger one, as I'm reading you right, or is this just, or do you have future plans of expanding there, where all of a sudden the pipe goes across the road, and now you expand out into, I don't know, what. And the protocol of the Water Industry Advisory Board is that we will. Any other questions from either of you?
I'm not sure anyone signed up. Last I looked, I'll double check. No.
I thought I saw 3. So do you have the sheet already, of people who signed up? Okay, let's move on then. Department reports? What have you been doing?
I know. I've been doing a lot, actually. Casino money, I am not a big proponent of gambling. I think it's a giant waste of money, but people are going to do it. We get in really good shape financially at the county. I mean, excellent fund balance. I would be shocked if we didn't lower taxes, actually, at this point. So, and the size of that benefit. We might even boost that even more. That's what we're looking at now. That's the video this week. A couple of big things that are a way to describe it. That is how Portland describes theirs. It would be a number of cabins that people would then go and live. So I'm in contact with Dutchess County. We're trying to do an intensive mental care unit up at the hospital. Not trying. We applied for money for that. We did not get the grant. We were applying for state grant. They've been doing this for about 5 years already. They are really a leader in this, so I got in contact with them at all the time here. So that's what I've been working on. And then maybe I can consider the other, just the homeless encampment case. So we'll see. I'll keep you updated on that. It has some supporters, it has some not supporting, and I don't really know where it's going to go. Children, there will be drug use, not outdoor drug use, but there will be drug use in the cabins. How do we address that? I called the EC, they said they didn't have the funding, and they also said 2023 was unlikely. They said they might even push to 2024, which I think I say, listen, this is a flood control channel. This is not just pretty. We need, the water has to go somewhere, and if it doesn't go into the flood control channel, it's going to go into the city. So before we blow up the bridge, and we'll see where we are. I would like kids who don't have access to a boat or don't have a house on Cuba Lake to actually have a place to swim. I had a good meeting with a couple of, I think, future congressmen. If not future congressmen, still people who have a lot of pull and sway. And they wrote a letter. These are the big things. Oh, one last thing. We approved a sustainability plan for the county. Not really a sustainability plan. It was more of a planning department. Mr. Terry Carroll is our sustainability person. He's going to look into that. So he's been looking at that too for a while, but now we have this new plan. Difficult, but we could do it that way. But hey, 1.5 megawatts of clean power would be great. So that's what I'm working on now. What else? Those. But just to tell you the situation, I mean, I saw a friend of mine from high school actually. From New Jersey, you used to take, you took her into New York City, same rules apply, basically. But that's what's being told to people coming to Cornell for the first time, is, don't go downtown at night. And for those of you that don't know, having a baby with Sarah, January 9th is the predicted due date. Pretty excited.
Congratulations.
I'll be back every month.
Okay, don't go away. I have a couple. Anybody else have questions?
No, please.
Casino money, does any of that go to the town?
Money go toward addiction services, frankly, but it goes to the general fund, and it's at a number now where last zero that out, so, I mean, even though our levy went up, we were able to zero it. Yeah, I even think that's going to be a low estimate. I mean, you're talking about 50 people with some serious problems.
Yeah.
And you're going to, if you're not a member of that village or a guest of a member of that village, you don't get aid. And the services are only for the people in that village. So, issue, as are other cities. And we're a very small city to kind of pull something like this off. A rehab, 30-day, dry out rehab kind of thing. There was only one available. I mean, it was Tuck Hill. And sheriff's deputy. We're going to put 2 sheriff's deputies at our DSS building downtown because of some of the criminal activity happening down there. It's easy to say. Where are we going to get?
I'm trying to get the mouth to Salmon Creek dredged, but I think this is what Patrick's been trying to do for a while. I think Steve Cole, we're doing the Army Corps of Engineers, when it came to the mouth of the creek, is not written. But anyways, enough of that. As usual, great report.
It's right there. I think Susan knows that.
Okay, I just want to reinforce that for you, okay? All right. Good evening.
Excuse me. With the guidance of T.G. Miller. A year ago, and then trying to get parts and pieces and meters and everything we needed. So the kickoff to that, they've assisted us with their back truck, in-kind services back. We paved one of their playgrounds that they just built. As per the list that everyone signed for our roads, it's going to be Speary Lane. Oh, yeah, so I've been working with residents of Ludlaville, that's in the packet as well, asking for the resolution. I might reach out to Angel. There's a process to trying to get rid of that. The placement of those signs, I was concerned about that they were in the right location. That's exactly where I
So I have a question about the money.
for the sign, so I would need that approved for a budget line.
Anybody else have any questions for Mike? We'll talk about the highway building in the working session.
Yes. Yep.
That's a good question.
That could have been my mistake to my email.
And you don't have the money in your budget?
I'd have enough to cover it. The vendor has them. I can get them and, get them up. Which, it's probably a good thing.
Well, then you won't have any more money for other signs later.
Correct.
will you?
Yes.
It's like when you want to make about the highway building.
Sure.
Later on. That's fine. All right.
Good to see you. So where folks are going to be able to apply to the code and planning department for things like a building permit. To folks by phone or those who prefer to submit via paper, we're obviously very happy to help them as we hear back from the state regarding those grant applications through the consolidated funding application, usually the second week.
Right online, you're going to have to charge a surcharge, is my understanding.
That's correct.
And I know that that's been a problem.
Online, the great option is you can you can let us know that you'd prefer to pay in cash, and you can swing by and drop that off. You can pay by check, patient portal type of thing, which I'm sure we all love. But, the thing is it works, and it gives, we're looking forward to going live with this right after Labor Day weekend. So yeah, absolutely, there'll be
In your packet.
Consent agenda, 1, 2, 3.
Board members will read the motions and resolutions that are, excuse me. I
Okay.
knew I had this paper sticking out here for a reason. On the, as I have written in there that the Lansing, Town of Lansing share of the local match will not exceed $25,000. That, so on page 38 at the top of the page, it says that, so,
Since they're in, they'll pay some, it drops ours down.
so when we're voting on that tonight, it's going to be on the 15th.
9,
That was just a memo, just provided as some background, and that was prepared by City of Ithaca engineering staff.
on that note, Andra,
599 to DB 5112.400. Allocation will be
3,
Okay. Resolution, D, letter D, resolution approving Highway Department purchase of replacement equipment.
Resolution to partner on federal safe streets and roads for all planning grant opportunity.
approving audit and budget modifications and supervisor's report.
I will move this.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motions and resolutions, is motion to approve professional services agreement with the
Most pertinent is the 30-day billing issue. If they put a bill in just after, no matter when they put the bill in, they can get paid.
I'll refer to guidance. Is this
But it's also pretty standard practice to change it to 45, just for those, that one time it might not work that.
concerned up, go to 45? What's the rest of the board want to do?
I like 45.
I would tend to agree.
Okay.
Is this, are they doing this for the whole project or just the Lansing part of it? Are they working, are
Information, I mean, we had a meeting with Labella and with Heart of Seacrest and with the town of Groton, and both benefit from this and you both share it, and how do you, so we're working on the distribution now of which pot of money comes out of. My understanding is, I guess we'll have 2 pots, 1 pot, 6 pots, whatever it is, work for them also,
okay,
which they'll be billed for that, if it's unique to them. If it's unique to Groton, it comes out 2,000 a pot. So that's what we're working for right now, trying to find the contingencies. I also suspect that the startup
Costs between the two towns, but as to individual analysis for individual town issues, land is obviously located in one place, and that's easy to identify. The differential in cost will consider and juxtapose against their presumptively reasonable standards and look for why there's deviation, et cetera, et cetera. So the mechanism of how that's...
third question, I assume, Ed, you're the point person, because they say there's a point person for the town?
Well, it's a good question. Keep some distance from Guy over here, because he can't be the point, even though, as we all know, with attorneys, they have this beautiful language, as all professions do, and they talk. You may want to leave now, because you may be... and accumulate, just like Guy has done with executive orders, right? So you have this massive amount, and yes, I'm going to stroke you until you start purring like a cat. Was to do beyond the scope of normal. And I can't think of anything more than being uncharted water, beyond the scope of normal.
As, you know, I think it's great to have the discussion about who the point person is, and I think that it's really interesting to kind of have that juxtaposition, the town supervisor. We've kind of struck up a great phone, 4 kind of separate projects running almost concurrently, right? We've got the siting permit process, we've got on the gauntlet of ORES, and get a siting permit, and then we get to build. Don't know what the applicant is going to ask, so I think I'm maybe answering my own question about the point person. It's probably anyone better than Mary Stebline at Labella. She's really has an incredible knowledge about stormwater, and I talked with Dave as well about kind of the capacity. We're really expecting almost to be hit with a generic environmental impact study that we have to memoranda that they will prepare for us to really bring our focus right away to some of the more significant issues in that way, because it's, you know, such a kind of a massive undertaking. So, you know, but of course I'm happy to do it.
Plan to it is that we're in uncharted water, but we have great navigators.
I think she demonstrated your point.
You're really looking forward to, I think the whole is greater than kind of the sum of its parts, where we're, you know, when we band together.
I mean, obviously,
Not this time.
at this
Oh, there's
time.
lots more questions.
It is funny, almost all those.
Yes.
Okay.
So, okay, yes. So I can go back and unmove it and move it again if you like.
Basically, it's to approve hiring Labella. It doesn't have these details.
From Labella that they be approved, subject to that change being made and subject to the final form of the agreement being acceptable to see.
Everybody else comfortable with that?
So should that be put in the motion?
Yeah.
Guy?
Yep. On behalf of the town of Lansing, once the final form in terms of the contract are agreed to by the town planner. Okay. You can say it if you want.
In the contract saying we will bill no later than the first of the month, which would solve the problem as well. So they're way.
Did you need to say something else, Andrew?
Could you read it?
Contract is agreed to by town planner. That's what I have written.
Yes.
Ruth Croft,
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore,
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Okay.
Okay, so that was Andra and then Joe?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, and then,
My concern, if all these little things are going to start adding up to a problem or not. And I know Pat said something about taking this out of next year's budget.
I have a similar concern. Well, first of all, anybody else want to comment?
Is it the?
We would save money, but it's not the big, the highway one was much more.
Yes. Yes, I know.
So, any questions, Ruth?
No.
Well, the applicant, and I'm just sharing information, it was a strain to do that. So, and of course, sidewalks are here to stay. And that was one of the understanding is that the other one would be sold, this is the smaller one. So this would be used in the winter, I guess by the highway or by, I don't want to speak for you, Mike.
You know, putting together my budget, which, yeah, I allocated money for half of that in my budget for that tractor, so that replacement.
Now, there's other ways, other things, so that's, we're on the hook for $650,000 over 4 years. But on the other hand, this project for Myers may not be done. So, this is 48,000. It was, the number was kicked around as 20 as a trade-in. That hasn't been verified, so I'm not going to. Where we go with this to have more flexibility as this 5-year plan comes into place, right? Run it like a business and see where these are. I don't like these last-minute purchases either, right? And this came some as a pride before it gets dumped back into the pot. And he saves that, and it goes back in the fund balance in the A fund. That is the possibility also. But 48 says $7,200. You want to save the taxpayers $7,200 now. I know it's out of character. We've done it. Then you pay next year an extra $7,200. You know, some of these don't work because the salt gets to them. So the board can decide where they want to go with this. If you think this is a good investment for the town, or because the materials are all over, but we need to know this. And I don't think it's tractor envy. You know, I think it's he's trying to be, as he's.
Yes, because the town has elected the blanket $10 million lost revenue exemption.
Then I'll ever study it. Just want to double check. And I also see here something about a $63,000
tractor. And have Pat come here and defend the next one next month. Because I don't, it's not that I don't.
We own it, we afford it, we need it, so we're going to plow the sidewalks. Trading it in, taking that money, offsetting the cost, it's a great saving.
I don't think there's any cost savings by waiting another month for the excavator.
But we can do that, I mean, that sounds,
100%. We own 3 excavators and there's one on the way, right, somewhere in there.
so we need,
That's for the head of the Park and Rec to perhaps discuss with us next month why we need that.
okay. I would feel comfortable,
100%. I didn't like that either, okay? I would have liked to have some time for information on this. Just anyways, this discussion would have been 3 months from now. Or
Right.
2 months from now during budget. So this is now if we don't need it, but this would have been in our budget discussion anyway. So we can remove,
think about it for a month, and then have a resolution in front of us, because that gave us chances to ask you questions, get,
Okay.
more information. He tried today, of course, he's on vacation, right?
Yeah.
So he tried today on vacation. It used to be 4 years, now I think it's either 2 or 3. You flip them, because there's more. In the old days, before they did all this, you used to put equipment on Craigslist, you had an auction, and you were at the mercy of whoever bid on it. And so they're all looking for the value. Would that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just trying to get a feel for, if this is.
It's a thoroughly thought out process. Amount of 48,979 change, and stop right there and don't do the 63 for the case excavator. That's the result.
The excavator?
Yep. Anything with an excavator gets omitted for tonight.
And the last resolved where it says 63,000? Well, I think if that's acceptable, then you're saying what?
I put it forward as an amendment, so Andrew, do you approve of the amendment?
Yes.
So we've amended.
Anything else we need to talk about on this
This
one?
is just really small. The second resolve,
The P and the R are reversed.
P and the R are reversed.
Really?
Oh,
The second result?
thank you.
I see.
Thank you. I didn't, yeah,
The
thank you.
second one, not the first.
Good catch.
I think that's one of those the guy says you can just fix after the fact.
Yeah, it's just a typo.
So, if we're all comfortable with the motion so amended and the corrections. Mrs. Munson?
Andrew Benson?
There was no Lansing Youth Services with one of the heads, Carrie.
I believe so. And
Well, and the executive order was extended through September 12th, so you can still Zoom, you can still,
Well, I think she would,
Over with the consultants, which is Bergman's, that were hired to help, how they want, and they even want to have a booth at the Lansing Carnival and Parade in September. So I think that'll be very interesting. I don't know how. The public's
Ruth?
In terms of what I have been working on personally, I did meet with Patrick and with Mikey to get their input on the 5 forecast. But I do want to have those done. My plan is to have those done, since we're coming up into budget time, to have them done in the next few weeks. Doing in terms of just the, renewal of, the trucks and other.
Community center?
No.
Or the roof? This is where the oboe music, as opposed to, now we put them in, right? Every 14 years, whatever. And Mikey can attest this during historical building, or if it is the schoolhouse that also needs a roof. I think it might be the schoolhouse, because they want to go, I think, things unraveled, and also wasn't a sense of urgency, it wasn't leaking, right? This one was done, as you can tell, they usually have skylights in them, they don't anymore, amongst other things, and it's
Among other things.
it's how much of a scramble. It's like when we do the hot list, right? The 100 things, the hot list to plan.
Prior to our next capital improvement meeting.
Absolutely. So what would you like at the next capital improvement committee meeting would be?
Just to spend the time.
Place as far as this goes, and see where it goes. So we have long-term,
Right.
but you at least get a concept of how much of that money you're going to sock away depends on a lot of different things, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Just to
so-
kind of up asset, and then, where we are in that life. Say an asset is 5 years old, but we're 7 years into it, is that asset going to be getting replaced soon? So that was kind of up.
Well, and we'll see where the reality comes in this, right?
Right.
Can and cannot, right? And that's fine. We'll see where it goes and what can be done. And
About planning board issues, there's been some concerns, and I sent an email out about this, about planning board meeting and how much shouldn't, because I don't want to get in a situation in which planning board members are having lots of discussions outside the meeting about a project that they're deciding.
you should probably widen that discussion to board members, planning board members, ZBA members, that type of thing, town board members. Advisory boards aren't open to the public, as far as this goes by design. But it should be board members, if that's what you want to go with, or you want to discuss it now over an open session.
I think we could talk about it generically in open session, but if we want to talk about specific individuals and specific
Litigation, there's some generic threats of litigation. I don't know, that would put you in executive session. But if you're going to talk about the general policy on the propriety and limits of ex parte communication, you have a vote on that. That is quintessentially problematic on all sorts of levels, and it's a very standard due process process that Joe's talking about. This has come up a lot of times in a lot of ways. So if you want to talk about the policy general, you would go into discuss the performance of particular individuals, at least to the extent that it addresses, format either. They're there to advise whatever board refers the matter to them, not to discuss internal communications and reviews with the public. So
planning board member is talking with somebody in the public who has a concern about an issue that's before the on these side conversations. And, I know that as we go out in the community, people ask us questions, and so I want to, figure out where we should move and how we should move forward about.
Also, when the general public comes up to you, they saw, right, after that meeting, and concerned people that may have, right? I mean, and what do you tell them? I can't talk about this now. We should, if you have any more comments, send them into the planning board. Send them into to whatever board if you have comments. The process even hasn't gone through yet, completed yet, right? I mean, where are the boundaries for that? I mean, then it stops. And if they think it's going in one direction, they don't keep pounding away at them. It's like, okay, we heard your concern. I don't know if the public, if that's enough for them.
Well, there's also got to be a process for the public to be able to get questions and the decision. I think there needs to be a process to answer public's questions.
Most effective for what, right? I mean, that's not it.
When someone comes to the planning board and says, don't do this project, I hate it, that doesn't help the planning board. And what I change it so it doesn't affect you as negatively, so that I'm helping the person understand what process would make their comments more effective.
Or whatever, and they're just trying to get out of there.
Right, I understand. It's not just the public, it's the applicant, the public, it's everybody.
There's a potential for comments. I usually say send them to the planning board. If this is an issue, send, and CJ has, I'm sure,
Comes in to the department referencing either a development project under review or is directed to the planning board and even sometimes to the town board, is sent verbatim.
And I think it's on the website, so you can go back and look at the accumulation of those comments as well.
We also drop off pieces of paper, we make sure they're scanned in and that the planning board receives them and they're in the project file, so.
And those come in quite frequently, because I think if you tell the public, don't come up and sandbag the members of the board, you also have to tell them, here's the way you get your questions answered.
it's like whatever is the raw nerve this time, right? And there's a whole bunch of, for instance, raw nerves going on here. Oh, I didn't know. I'm not in favor of this project. Okay. Continues, the Workplace Violence Committee will be busy. And there will be people being drawn in saying this behavior is violence, and we will address it, and it will be crystal clear what the options are.
here's where the agenda is, here's where the town website is, it's really answering questions. I spent a lot of time telling people where to find the information and that kind of thing. It's not
planning board to engage the public after a meeting that's going on with a process? Or should you, sitting back there with a group of 6 people around them talking, the perception it may be different? Or when somebody snags me out there, you want to say, you need to talk about this.
Strictly avoiding ex parte communications on matters under control and referring them to the appropriate board. Answering questions. When you go to a town board meeting, when you go to a planning board meeting as a town board member and speak out with the concern, point those board members, you have gravitas when you walk in that room. So what you do as a town board member in that planning, if somebody doesn't like something that is permitted in the zoning, they can scream at the planning board. Ultimately, you're going to be asked about the water district, the drainage district, the SWIP that you're going to have to approve, the developers and applicants. And that's where things really derail. And that's why when you read the American Planning Federation advice on this exact issue, they're like, don't do it. Direct them where to submit their comments or come up many times before. There is a rub with the First Amendment. I remember once before we had this discussion, advise them to go to the planning board during a public hearing and make a comment. That's very different from engaging in internal communication. He has an opinion about stuff, obviously. But if you've gone too far in terms of wearing it on your sleeve or helped people oppose it or taught them what to say or this is dangerous ground for me to walk on because you're the chair, but your deputy take over because the gate flows both ways. If for some reason the planning board imposes a condition or turns down a project on land use determinations, if you don't like what's allowed in the zone, you change the zoning. You don't deny people their use rights. You lose your First Amendment rights. It's just as a person who's a decision maker and acting almost as a judge, or whether you like them and whether you like the project. If there's something you don't like about the project, that's what conditions are for. And if you don't want that use in the zone, it's a constitutional issue. But there's a lot of other resources I can send out to get that conversation going at the town board level to maybe consider. They're all there, they're all experienced, we want their input.
Do you also have articles on the rules of liaisons? The liaison for the planning board and give us report, right? Joe does that now. When I was a liaison for the village, you just sat there until they asked, background information on certain things. And that's it. But liaisons are there to, once the meeting starts, unless I'm wrong.
You're talking about basic policy and procedure, and the town doesn't have basic policy and procedure for liaisons. Observationally, I'll note that it is somewhat common. That's relatively uncommon. And it's highly questionable whether there even should be something called a liaison to a ZBA, since they function almost judicially and should be completely timed to put some basic guidelines in place for what committees are advisory, what committees are not, what the role of an advisory committee is, what the role of...
Any other discussion from the board? Okay.
I guess I'd like to know, person, that's a bunch of, what, but you don't, you just sit there and you listen.
But when we go to the Bolton Point meetings, we don't.
TCOS, or remember of ITCTCTCTC, right? That, listen, and I was there as a representative, and that's fine, of the town, that's fine. But there are times when
Well, I will say that we did about 3 or 4 years ago, say, when we went into this zoning.
If we need information. The other thing, though, is these relationships evolve, right? So we really can't be, at least I can't be judgmental on what's happening. That might be useful. So where's the balance? But I think with liaisons, especially, if planning board or other board and a lot of the chairs are responsive because they know you're there. But also, if they invite you into the conversation, you're.
We, I think, have, or I should say, webinars and seminars and stuff that become available to meet their hourly training requirements. So just as background FYI, we have a local law that says fairly readily available for free through a bunch of different organizations. And then we also require 2 hours of training encompassing, legal, planning, code, where we just do some, basic site plan and advanced site plan as well as. But in addition, I was thinking it could be, very cool for this board if we did a separate session for. I believe it had to be open to the public. It could be very a chance for you to really ask questions, hypotheticals. An orientation binder to each of the, our statutory boards, our planning board and our zoning board of appeals, to give them a lot of background on, here, and everybody's sick of Zoom and all that. So I'm thinking it could be really beneficial for all of us to really meet in person, have these trainings. Each board member, at least once, if not twice a year, is reminded about ex parte communication. To our volunteers is extremely important to us. So I just say, that we take.
So I literally just updated that program through 2022. Because I got recruited to do 3 trainings, 2 by the associate.
It's within the general scheme of what we asked for, that would be very helpful. What kind of comments, where to find the town zoning code, what issues the planning board actually deals with. So, but if you come to it and say, I'm worried about traffic, I'm worried about light, I'm worried about noise, and you describe your situation.
Their concerns, because sometimes their own words is how it is, right? I'm concerned about this project because.
Comments can be helpful to the board. This is not giving them talking points. This is saying, if you have concerns, here's the kinds of concerns that the board actually
say, but how you say it, the medium can become the message, and that's where I think things get lost. People should just understand that there's a 30-acre patch of woods, and I'm going to pick on something that's actually a claim I'm dealing with now. And in 1980, whatever, somebody saw a rare woodpecker in those woods. So you have to document every square inch of those woods. Go to the lab of ornithology and see if they have a mapped critical nesting area or feeding area for bald eagles. That's literally what the courts look at is traffic engineering studies. So if you have a neighborhood that thinks that a subdivision next to it is going to be a problem, what they need is probably some traction. I mean, I've often had people come in, not in this town, well, it happens on occasion, but I've had towns like, but all everyone's talking about after they speak is, why was so, maybe they didn't express it correctly, but what's wrong with having a bike rack in front of the store? You know what I mean? So you
on what the planning board decision process is. What are they going to do? How are they going to do?
You really need to get going on highway building. This guy's got to get up.
DJ, myself, and Ed, and Steve Kushner from Bergman have been discussing of a mailer that we would then send out to maybe.
One of the things I was concerned about when they did the survey, for instance, for Myers Park, is they sent out the emails to all the people. It's something that the Lansing Community Council does, but they're giving you an appeal every year during the holiday season. Page, right? You get 4 out of a page. Labor and materials would be $1,160, and the postage would be $27. People are made aware that this is a discussion topic. Hold that thought. So, having said that, this is
By the printers now, like Arnold printer, you can hand them your mailing list. Give them your Arnold printing can set it up so that if you
rural printing.
Arnold. A-R-N-O-L-D.
Well, you got the thing on.
State Street.
Otherwise, and when they print the cards, the addresses will be on them. You don't have to do anything except putting
All right,
stamps
so
on it?
I have time to, so we have time to do this because we want to mail them out, what, like September 10th, something like
We
that?
Yeah.
have time,
Yeah, you want to get bulk, you want to get,
Permits, what you
I don't-
said?
yes, bulk rate.
I have nothing to do with the postage here. That's all done by your department. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Well, and to Joe's point, you can also hire printers.
What was that? There was some,
I think there's a printer on the other side of the lake that does up in Teeper.
Yeah, I haven't asked them if
I
they do
forget
it, so I
what their
don't
name
know.
is, Eagle?
My point is, we're not going to have another meeting before then. So we need to be able to allocate some money to have this all done. It's like the freshman in college when the credit card filled up. Until you run out of pizza and Pepsi, right?
Well, we do have to,
I'd have to look at this because it really seems pretty far divorced from tools, infrastructure, things like that.
And mailing of this project, postcard mailing.
right, the postcard mailing would explain the open house, which we're gonna have a discussion. Steve's not available.
FedEx does.
Doesn't matter, whatever you guys are comfortable
I think
with.
the 17th would work well, and look, we're gonna have a conversation with Steve
Tomorrow at 10.
tomorrow night.
We're hoping he can do Saturday the 17th.
Saturday.
But what is the... It says on the chair. So if it is the 17th, I'm sure you...
Ben Fallon told, no, she accepted willingly to help do the voiceover. I don't think anyone wants to hear my... we discussed balloons, or we somehow figured to do it, we...
well, Guy will volunteer you.
I can get involved in...
So-
Sure, and then, obviously I can get coffee and hot cocoa too, like, who are those crafts from the Women's North Lansing Auxiliary.
Or you might be able to borrow them from the church.
Well, you started talking about a motion to approve money, but you never finished with that.
Well, thank
Are you
you,
going to
Mrs.
circle
Munchkin.
back to that, or
Sure.
did you?
Do you want to make it 5,500 and give you guys a budget to do stuff?
Sure.
All right, you want to move it? You want it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
And I'm figuring you can save some money on the,
Need some of this. When is the open house?
Tentatively.
9/17. Sure. Here, let me move over.
Open house and supplies for the open house in September of '22. Does that sound correct?
Sounds good.
I guess it's,
Or road maintenance, what percentage used for, which is your DB fund, right? Most others. And that-
That
Yes, ma'am.
correctly? Okay,
Does
that's,
that go into the motion?
I think we.
I was going to put that,
Balance, because you're also going to do the open house with the materials. Make it generic.
Briefly, as for the timeline, I think what we're anticipating, and Mikey's got
Well,
the...
I don't,
okay. Anyone opposed?
are developing essentially these advertising strategies that we've just gone over. Mikey mentioned the drone bid for the open house. That will also, we're thinking the timing can give folks an opportunity to come to the town board meeting just a few days later and express at the fire department carnival. And then also we're anticipating, and we'll Ed can hopefully give 16th meeting, do I have that right? Off the top of my head? 19th, sorry. Yes, the October 19th town board. Other information about that, I'm not that savvy about about how bond resolution is developed and such. I know we do have to.
What your board would be involved in, assuming you pass it, it would be subject to permissive referendums, so there would be notices, publication, or you would withdraw the resolution and retool like they did for this building. You'd have that out. It has to do with how the signatures are verified, i.e. having a sign-on sheet at the local gas station where the signatures aren't actually collected and verified wouldn't count. The petition, yes, it would.
Property owners, residents, everybody.
Whoever voted, and the last...
it would
No,
be-
who gets the vote? Okay,
So in that situation, you wouldn't, like corporations wouldn't have a vote, landowners wouldn't have a vote,
right.
right? I mean,
Consolidated Water District number 3 when I was challenged. Was that similar to when they challenged the bond?
Yeah.
there was a, right, same type of thing, although like creating a bond creates an expense that requires a tax to support it. You're pledging the full faith and credit of the town, so
As soon as that is finalized, and we hope to see you all there.
Does the board have any questions?
Through all the schemes and the different site plans and just all the effort and,
So if I get this card in the mail about the open house, is there anything yet posted on our website about this highway building that somebody could?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
and we should have received as part of the packet, we did circulate the information on the feasibility.
Amongst other things, right? You just mentioned that.
Along with everything else. Yep, we'll get there as soon as I can.
And also will be on,
As well.
see what the public says.
That's going to make it so that everybody gets it.
Right.
They won't read it, but they'll at least get it.
Right, yeah.
You know, we're trying to work through all the timing of these different pieces and making sure, I mean, we do want to coordinate much engagement with you, you know, decide whether you'd want to set a public hearing for the October meeting, you know, really kind of have as well, take some of the central images from the feasibility study. If you felt that that was appropriate or that you wanted to do that, associated with the project, and certainly could,
Well,
as far as I know.
That subject. If not, I guess Mike, you can go home and,
He's been asking, hey, you know, when are we going to update the code enforcement local law? There's a lot of new guidelines from New York State Department of State. I think I mentioned it to each of you. At least take a preliminary look, prepare a very straightforward memo, just kind of a one page with a few bullet points on what was in building code. We really need to get this cleaned up, and I know Guy has been wanting to do this for a while, so that would be fantastic. And with your okay